Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about AAA development and how it differs from indie development and what it's like as a career. So firstly, let me talk a little bit about my own career. I worked in, I guess, AAA for 5 years, and then I've been indie for 5 years. And I use AAA in quotation fingers because it's somewhat of a nebulous concept. I didn't work on like some superstar team. I worked at Heavy Iron Studios for 2 years, and we did like The Incredibles Rise of the Underminer, and then I was working on Ratatouille before I left, and then I worked at High Impact Games, and we did Ratchet and Clank Size Matters for the PSP and Secret Agent Clank. I worked on a bit of other projects before I left. So I haven't been on one of these uber 100-man teams that are, synonymous with modern AAA, and certainly going to PSP instead of Xbox 360 and PS3 for when that generation switched allowed me to stay on sort of a smaller team size, which is very appealing as a game developer, and certainly one of the reasons why I went indie is because on a AAA team, you're most likely, a cog in this giant machine, and you have control over one little area, and that's that. And I mean, certainly there are people who are higher up and can exert control over a larger team, but I think it's very difficult to get into that position, no matter how talented you are, just because there are so few of those positions. Because basically what happened was the game industry has been consolidating into these uber teams, and so people who are, maybe directors of games, and people developing quirky weird things, maybe reporting to someone else on the team, whereas before they had more control over a project, a smaller project granted, but a project, and then now they're just a cog in a tiny machine. And I think to some extent that's the main reason that mobile and indie development is so appealing to a lot of developers. It's because, everyone got into this industry because they want to make games. And if you're just doing, the animation of, the character touching the wall or something, and, that's your responsibility, or you just make sure to, like on the art side, maybe you just like rig characters, when before you were an animator, now you're just a rigger, so you just pick bone weights all day and all night. I think that's less fulfilling to a game developer, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of interest in the indie development, and certainly that's why I personally wanted to do indie development, because I wanted to make my own games. I wanted to be the guy on top, so to speak, and say, Neverending Nightmares is a game I want to make, and I tell everyone, this is the game I want to make, and let's do it, and so I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can do that with our little indie team and our Kickstarter success. But I guess the original question, sorry, this was my back to the original question gesture that was very terrible. The original question was, what is it like working on a AAA team? And, things about working conditions and all that. And I think, to some extent, it's gotten a bit harder since I left. Now, I worked a lot of hours, and I worked very hard, and there were definitely some challenges in AAA, and certainly I was, to the end of my AAA career, I was paid pretty well, and it's kind of depressing to think about, the money that I left behind to do the Retrograde and Neverending Nightmares. I haven't gotten compensated, like nothing, negative money for Retrograde, and Neverending Nightmares, you know, I did budget some money for living expenses because, I mean, my bank account was negative. I'm still in debt to my parents. So, I mean, certainly indie development has uh, its own problems. But, like, the thing is about AAA development that is also unappealing to me is that essentially you're stuck being pretty mobile. It's very few people pick a company and then stay at that company for their entire career. And there are several reasons for this, and I think the most common one these days is that companies just don't last. You know, high impact games, I started there pretty early, you know, in the company's history, and, you know, I left, I know a year or two or three before it shut down, but it shut down, and it was very sad because, you know, I had friends worked there, and, you know, they had to go find other places to work, and so, you know, you also look at a company like EALA, and so, like, I always use this example, I probably said it somewhere, but so EALA, if you look at, in the scheme of things, like maybe 15, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, EALA was top of the world. They were the best developer. They had the Medal of Honor series, and I don't mean the, you know, Medal of Honor War Fighter or Face or whatever it was. I mean like Medal of Honor in the PS1 days. And Medal of Honor was like the top title. And EALA was the studio that did it, and so they were on the top of the world. But after the failed reboot of EALA, or sorry, of Medal of Honor, EALA has sort of been downsized and downgraded, and had a bunch of layoffs. And I have a very good friend who unfortunately lost his job just because, you know, EALA didn't make a profitable game, and so now they're weird like DICE LA or something, I don't know, but now they're sort of subservient to the Digital Illusion CE, do they even call the company that anymore? Anyway, but they're sort of like Battlefield support team, which is crazy to think that, you know, you were in the top of the world and now you're not doing super well. You know, you say, oh, 20 years is a long time. Look at all the generations of consoles. That's PS1 and we're on PS4. But if you think about it as a professional working on a game, right, like 20 years is less than a career. I mean, I've been working 10 years. I'm not going to retire in another 10 years. You know, I probably have another 30 to go or more if I'm going to live long. I don't know. I feel like life expectancy. Anyway, that's another topic. So I'm going to be working till die at desk is my retirement plan. So I'm going to be working another 100 years. The career, you know, your career can't exist at just one company. And the problem for that is that how do you build a family? How do you build your life when, you know, every 5 years or so or less, you know, you're going to be switching companies to either get a better position or work on a better team, or, you know, your current company is going down and you want to go up. I mean, there's a few companies where, you know, maybe you can be a lifer. But I mean, even then, I don't think there's any guarantees. I mean, you look at Blizzard and they're super successful, and you know, they've done great things. Are they always going to be successful? Probably, but maybe not. So it's tough, right? I mean, so it's very difficult as a game developer to sort of deal with the fact that, you know, you can't go work for a company and stay there forever because your company probably won't be around forever. And I mean, like, even if you pick like a publisher or something, like, you know, let's say you work for Microsoft, and Microsoft has you know, a number of internal game studios, and they've, you know, shut them down and started new ones up and stuff. Like, they killed a bunch of them, the Crimson Sky people, I forget what they were called, the Flight Simulator, I don't know, they've shut down a lot of studios in Microsoft and then started up new ones. And so, like, if you're a game developer, then that's tough. You lose your job, have to find a new one, and you know, maybe you leave games, and I think that's what a lot of people do, is they, you know, leave games, which, you know, is not something that's appealing to me, but, you know, uh, I mean, it's something I might have to consider at some point, just because, you know, if I have a family, and which I would like to, then it's difficult. And so, I mean, like, it's also difficult. I mean, the long hours and the burnout and stuff. But everyone talks about that. But I don't think people really talk about the lack of stability. You know, the fact that your career is going to be moving around, and so it's weird because, like, you know, one might say, oh, live in Los Angeles or live in the Bay Area, you know, there's a number of studios and then you can move around. But, I mean, I imagine it's similar in the Bay Area, but at least in Los Angeles, it's like when I get a new job in games, you know, when I moved from Heavy Iron Studios to High Impact Games, I had to move across the city because the commute was just terrible and it was miserable. And, you know, so I mean, like, it's tough to move, and if you have a family and a house, you know, that's tough to say, oh, we're gonna move, or, you know, and sometimes, you know, maybe you want to move to Seattle, maybe you want to work for, you know, a company up there. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's tough, and so I mean, that's something I'd like to do with Infinite Tap Games is, you know, if I can carve out a section of the market, you know, like indie psychological horror, you know, sort of the indie Silent Hill games, you know, sort of where I see myself, or what I'd like to make. And so, like, you know, and obviously I'd like to keep the quality up on, like, some of the Silent Hill games, but I mean, like, I feel like I can, you know, if I can capture that audience, I feel like I can, you know, have stability. I think there's going to be people that will want those types of games, and I think that with a small team, you're more agile, and, you know, you're not going to necessarily go out of business if one of your game doesn't meet its sales target, which honestly is like the reality of the AAA development scene. Is like, as soon as, you know, your studio makes an unprofitable title, then they shut it down, or you run out of money, or whatever. I mean, depends if you're indie or publisher owned, but I mean, like, or even if you make it a successful title like BioShock Infinite, then they shut you down anyway because reasons. So it's kind of terrifying. It's terrifying to work in games as an older person, you know, as a younger person. You know, when I got out of college, or even when I moved to High Impact Games, it was like, whatever, I'll move anywhere. I don't have a, you know, a family or whatever. I can do whatever I want, just make great games. And well, some of my games were not super outstanding, but you know, I mean, it's very carefree, and I think that's to some extent why game development is sort of a young person's game, and it's tough for people with families, which is a shame, because I think, you know, as people get more experience, they have a lot to give to the industry. But, you know, there's certainly burnout, and again, I've been burned out, and I've done a lot of overtime. But you know, I think a lot of it is just, you know, the lack of stability. And you know, that's something my wife asked me, like, you know, why don't you do something where you can say, you know, this is where I can stay, I'm guaranteed stability. And I can't really give her a company that I feel like that's definitely the case, except maybe Valve. But you know, I mean, I don't know if I want to, you know, take like 8 years to make Half-Life 3. Why can't they make Half-Life 3? Ugh. Anyway, maybe if I could work on Half-Life 3, I'd work at Valve, but I don't know if they're actually doing that. No, I don't know. I'm sure Valve is a great place to work, and maybe I'll be sending my resumes there if Neverending Nightmares doesn't turn out. But fingers crossed about Neverending Nightmares. Anyway.